Yo, what up, fools? So, this is the first episode of the Geeky Coach Reviews, and I am here to talk about Quantumania. I took my 7-year-old to go see it last night, and we had a good time with it. I think overall, what I will say about this movie is that if you are a fan of the first two movies, you are probably not going to like Quantumania. However, if you are a fan of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, you are going to like this movie. I think that the biggest thing that I've seen or that I saw with it is that it feels not so much like an MCU movie, but more like a Star Wars movie or a science fiction movie. I think that the character development that they do with really anyone outside of Kang and Jonathan Majors' portrayal of Kang feels a little bit lackluster. There is not a lot of character development for our heroes outside of Cassie, who is Ant-Man's daughter. There is really a misuse, I think, of the Wasp in terms of she doesn't play a major role in the film until the very end. And all of that being said, I still think it's a solid flick. I think it's worth the value of going out and seeing it. I think Jonathan Majors does a great job in terms of his portrayal of Kang the Conqueror. And make sure you stick around for the two post-credit scenes that occur near the end of the film. If you've got young kids, this one's probably good for 8 and up. The violence that's in it is very, I'll call it cartoon violence. And that's the way I looked at, say, the Star Wars prequels. The same way that those have violence in them is the same way this movie kind of has it. The only time where my 7-year-old had a little bit of a struggle with the movie is there are some deeper dialogue scenes, specifically between Hope, and I think that's Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and Kang, in terms of some of their back and forth and some of how they know each other and how Hope finds out more about Kang. So that did drag a little bit. I do think that the pacing is a little weird in the movie in terms of it feels like it jumps around a fair bit, although the story is relatively coherent. That all to be said, if I were to give this out of 5 mugs, I'd give this 3 out of 5 mugs. So worth going to see in the theaters. You probably don't want to wait for Disney Plus, just given the visual spectacle of all of it. But I think anything beyond that, if money's tight, I'm not necessarily suggesting you go out and see this one. However, it's a fun time. And again, if you liked the slapstick nature of kind of Scott and the crew in the first 2 Ant-Mans, you don't get any of that here. And it's not as humorous and it's not as comedy driven as the previous Ant-Man movies. I think there's a quote from Jonathan Majors out there that talks about how Kang is a no-nonsense villain. And so there's a lot of no-nonsense in here. Now, that's not to say that there aren't comedic moments. If you get a chance to go see it, the introduction of MODOK is just situationally hilarious. My 7-year-old found MODOK completely hysterical, despite the fact there is I'll call it a PG inappropriate joke really having to do with MODOK towards the end of the movie. I don't think it's anything crazy, but language and those kind of things, it pops up. I do think that there's only a few instances of foul language in the movie, and I think beyond that, I think it's relatively appropriate for kids. If your kids have seen the Avengers movies, it's no more violent than those. And that was something that we just went through on a journey with my son, probably over the last month or so, as we kind of watched the major films out of the MCU. I think everything outside of the Captain America movies, because I think that the pacing in those is a little slow for a younger kid. But that being said, he had a great time with it. So if you're looking for something to go out and see this weekend, I do recommend going and seeing it, but it's not necessarily a must-see movie. And if you like me doing this kind of content, these kind of videos, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, and I will make an effort to make sure that I'm coming on and talking about specifically the big MCU movies, some of the geek things. I'm looking at Shazam coming up, Guardians 3 coming up, and I will probably do a review on Dungeons & Dragons. For those that know me, I'm a big Dungeons & Dragons fan. I've been a DM in a campaign for really the last 2 years. and I'm excited to see what they do with that movie. So if you like that, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, and check out more of the Geeky Coach reviews coming soon.